Virginia Meyer. She got her PhD from UC Davis studying vernal pools with Mike Barber. And she is what I call a true botanist. She gets out there, gets down on the ground with her hand lens and identifies microscopic little plants. I'm not a true botanist, but I do like hanging out with her to learn the names of all these fabulous plants that she knows so well. So I'm going to turn it out over to Ginna, and she will talk about her favorite hikes in the El Dorado foothills and mountains. Ginna.
Thank you, Deb. Thanks for those kind words. Mostly I just have a lot of fun. So can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Yeah. Can you see it now? It says,
we see it.
Okay, very good. That's all I wanted to know. Okay, so we'll go ahead and start the slideshow. There we go. Okay, so I'm supposed to be doing a talk on my favorite hikers, right? Well, this is just my opportunity to show off my beautiful granddaughter. Yeah, and here we are with our vernal pools, and she's my favorite hiker, and I'm going to make sure that she becomes a great botanist. So, oh wait, what I was supposed to talk about my favorite hikes. Well, okay. Well, having studied vernal pools, I kind of have to start there. I'm going to kind of make a little transect from the Great Valley, the Sacramento and San Joaquin valleys, up to the foothills of the Sierra, and then a little bit higher up in elevation. So, and I'm going to skip around a little bit because I had a horrendous time deciding which places and which hikes, which trails to choose from, because I have so many that I just adore. So I had to whittle it down. I whittled it down as much as I could, but I will have some ideas about resources of where you can go to find more wonderful hikes, especially your fellow hikers. Everybody's been to wonderful places, and I'm always finding new places to go from talking to other folks that like to get out there. Okay, so vernal pools for me are very special. These are habitats that are shallow wetlands that we find where there are depressions in the ground. And underneath the soils of these depressions, we have some kind of water restricting layer. In the eastern part of the Sacramento Valley, we have vernal pools that have a hard pan, and that hard pan is some cemented minerals, and that keeps water from being distributed further down into the ground, and so perches on top of this hard pan, and therefore you end up having shallow water in these depressions during the winter months. The thing I love best about vernal pools is the amazing diversity of mostly native plants. There are relatively few non-native plants that are able to survive in a habitat that is aquatic in the winter and bone dry and xeric in the summer. And so we have those that are native that are well adapted to this. The other thing is that you have incredible diversity. So in this little spot, which is less than a square foot, you can count at least 8 different species of native plants that are just quite amazing. So I love vernal pools, and I spend time with them even though I don't have to anymore. I just love them. In addition to a plethora of native plants, diversity of native plants, we also have a lot of insects and other critters that are associated with vernal pools, like endrenid solitary bees that make their homes underground. And there are also a great number of these insects that use the vernal pool flowers for food, but a number of these insects can also use vernal pool plants as host plants for the young of the species. Like this fairy moth, it's actually using this checker bloom for a food source, but it uses other native vernal pool plants as host plants. So where can you see these vernal pools? Well, there are some that are close by and easy to get to. At the Mather Preserve, also known as the Illa M. Collin Conservation Preserve, is easy to get to if you know how to get to the Mather Regional Park off of Eagle's Nest in Rancho Cordova. All you have to do is drive all the way to the end of the pavement of Eagle's Nest. And when you get to the gravelly, potholed, cruddy old road, drive along there and stop along the side of the road, walk either east or west into what looks like pretty much grassland. But in late March, mid-March to mid-April is usually the peak time to see the most flowering plants. So after the water has receded, either by evaporation or draining into the adjacent soils that have dried out, then this is when the peak flowering season is, and they are just wonderful to explore. Another one that is not too far from the Mather Preserve or the Illa M. Collin Preserve is at Nimbus Overlook. You don't think about that. Vernal pools on top of there, huh? So this is just on Hazel Avenue, and the way to get there is just by making a sharp right turn almost as soon as you go over the bridge over the American River, and you'll see Nimbus Dam on your right, and then what you'll see is a road to your right before you get to the stops or to the stoplight. It's a sharp right turn. You're going up the hill. There's a parking lot at the top of the hill. And once you're parked, to the west, you will see this grassland with these little mounds. And in amongst those mounds and grassland, you will find several lovely vernal pools in the early spring. And so this is a great place to visit. But there's other things to see at Nimbus Overlook besides the vernal pools at the top of the bluff. At the top of the bluff, there is a trail down into a canyon, and this canyon has a wonderful rock wall, which is one of my favorite places to look for native plants. Is rock walls with thin soils. This is obviously you can see that this is all of river cobble, just layers and layers and layers of river cobble. And there are some wonderful native plants going there, including, I'm going to say it, Joshnaria. There we are. Okay, some lovely California fuchsia grows there, along with a lot of other lovely plants. So here's a couple of my favorite hikers, Jennifer and Gail. So you may see a few of my favorite hikers sprinkled throughout this little presentation. And of course, there are animals here as well. When we were visiting Nimbus Overlook here recently, we saw a pocket gopher at work. He was fun to watch. But you'll also see pipevine swallowtails here in the springtime. There are the pipevine, the California pipevine does grow down there in the canyon on the lovely trees that you find there. And therefore, you're going to see pipevine caterpillars and also pipevine swallowtail adults like this one. So there's another spot to go to, though. I mean, you can do through all three of these places in one day easily. And what you want to do is hop back onto Hazel Boulevard, Hazel Avenue, I guess it is. Head north. So continue to head north just about a mile until you get to Sunset. Make a right at Sunset. There's a light there. There's a stoplight. Make a right. About a quarter mile down, you will come to, on your right, Phoenix Park, which is a Fair Oaks park. In that park, it has all the regular park accoutrements like soccer fields and baseball fields and restrooms and play equipment and all that good stuff. But on the east part of the park, there is an 8-acre vernal pool preserve, which is really lovely. Some of the loveliest vernal pools that I've seen are here at Phoenix Park. And there is a trail that goes through the preserve, so you can see some of the wonders of the vernal pools. So one of the things, another of the things that I love about vernal pools is sometimes, not always, but sometimes you see this little ring effect. And what that is that different plants that grow in vernal pools have slightly different environmental preferences, if you will, or requirements. And so some like to grow in the very bottom of the pool, which has the longest duration of standing water, and also is under the deepest part of the water when the pool actually has standing water. Others like slightly higher elevations, maybe just 1 or 2 inches higher elevation. It's kind of interesting that just 1 or 2 inches of elevation can make a difference in the plants that grow. So this is what we've got here is a classic ecotone. We've got uplands that are drier and that support a number of different plants that like drier conditions, and also maybe a deeper soil without a hard pan beneath. And then we have plants that grow with different tolerances to differences in the amount of water and the duration of the water as you move from the higher elevations down to the lowest elevations of the pool. Another really good thing about vernal pools, there's no poison oak. So you can get down on your hands and knees and you can get down there and scramble around, and you don't have to worry about coming home with blisters. Another great place to visit vernal pools is the Jepson Prairie Natural Reserve. This is a University of California natural reserve. It's off of Highway 113 south of Dixon. And though most of the vernal pools you can't really visit on your own when you visit Jepson Prairie, every spring, Jepson Prairie does host docent-led walks pretty much every weekend for probably a couple of months, so that you can join one of those docent-led hikes and get to see these vernal pools. And these vernal pools are a bit different than the pools that we have on the eastern side of the valley. These are more alkali vernal pools, so there's a little bit more, a little bit higher pH in the soils and in the water. And also what restricts the water here is not a cemented mineral hard pan, but instead a very dense clay pan that restricts water from going deeper into the soil layers. And so you see slightly different plants. A lot of plants are in the same genus, but are different species. So that's really fun to see. You say, wait a minute, this looks like Exonex that I saw over at Phoenix Park, but it's a different species and it's slightly different. So that's really fun to visit. But the uplands that surround the vernal pools, the matrix that the vernal pools exist within, are also very interesting and can harbor our wonderful native plants as well. Although you can see from this photo at Phoenix Park that there are a number of non-natives that are joining the native lovely Calochortus luteus or gold nuggets, a really beautiful Calochortus lily. Here's some more of my favorite hikers. And even though this is not nearby, Carrizo Plain is a wonderful place to go for vernal pools and a bunch of other habitats. I'm sorry. So I highly recommend visits down to Carrizo Plain. This is west of Taft, west of Bakersfield. And in a good super bloom year like this one, this was 2017, I think I took this photo, you will literally see billions and billions and billions and billions of flowers. It is just quite incredible. So Howard Ranch is a part of the Cosumnes River Preserve, but is accessed to the east of the main part of the Cosumnes River Preserve from Rancho Seco Park. And there is you can do your own tour there, accessing it from Rancho Seco Park. And it's about, I think it's about an 8-mile out and back trail that you can visit through Howard Ranch, which has some wonderful vernal pools as well. And finally, up at North Table Mountain Ecological Reserve, which is north of Oroville, we have a basaltic tableland. And on that basaltic tableland, there are places where there are depressions. And that basalt, of course, it's a rock. And that rock does act as that water restricting layer to allow water to accumulate in the depressions that we see on top of Table Mountain. And so therefore you have vernal pools there. And they're slightly different than all of the other vernal pools that we've talked about. I will caution you, however, North Table Mountain has become an extremely popular place to go. The San Francisco Chronicle did a little article about North Table Mountain. And so, so many people are interested in going. So I would caution that you not go on a weekend. You would need to go during the week and early in the day to get a place to park. So I would caution you about that. And also these vernal pools or actually the flowers at their peak at North Table Mountain Reserve do bloom a little bit earlier than some other spots. So probably, you know, late March into early April is probably the peak time to go visit. Okay, so that's vernal pools. Now we'll head up the hill. So we'll head up into the foothills of the Sierra. And of course, we have to say something about our Pine Hill Preserve. So Pine Hill Preserve, it actually is a partnership of lots of organizations, especially the Bureau of Land Management and our local chapter of the California Native Plant Society. We are very heavily involved in a lot of different aspects with the Pine Hill Preserve. So here you're seeing a map of the preserve, which is available on the Pine Hill Preserve website. And you can see that there are a bunch of different disparate parts of the preserve. But what they are found within is what we call the Gabbro intrusive complex. All of this rather kind of beigeish area is where we have a special type of parent material called gabbro. And gabbro is an intrusive rock. So it's an igneous intrusive rock. So it forms very much the way gabbro, or excuse me, that granite does, except the mineral composition is different. And because of that different mineral composition, then we end up with some specialized plants. And so the Pine Hill Preserve is home to a number of rare and endangered plants. And it's a wonderful place to visit. So one place to visit is Kanaka Valley. And we do host, along with the Bureau of Land Management, docent-led hikes in the springtime, generally throughout April, the weekends of April, and then to the beginning of May. And so usually our first hike that we sponsor along with the Bureau of Land Management is a bird hike with Chris Kennard, who is with the Audubon Society down in Sacramento County. And he is an incredible birder. He'll admit to that, but he will not admit to being an incredible botanist as well. And he is. I know that he is. I've had experience with him to know that he is. And it is such a pleasure to go hiking with him. So for not only for the birds, but also for the plants. But later on, we'll have our plant hikes. We generally have at least 3 plant hikes. So hikes in Pine Hill Preserve that are centered on the plants. In Kanaka Valley last September, there was about a 6-acre fire. And as botanists, we get really all excited. So we are fire followers ourselves. We get all excited because you never know what's going to come up after a fire or in that burn. And one thing is that the plants that have underground storage organs like corms, like bulbs, like rhizomes, tend to be stimulated by the fire. There's a lot of things about the fire. First of all, the fire does not reach, the heat of the fire does not reach those underground bulbs and corms and rhizomes, so they survive fine, even if the above ground plant is burned to a crisp. And then other plants that are on the surface, of course, can get burned up, and that releases area, it releases space, but it also gives access to more sunlight. The other thing is that the fire then produces ash, and the ash is very nutrient dense. So now you've got nutrients. The only other ingredient you need to get a lovely plant show and wildflower show is some rain, And so we did get some rain. And so all of these little white things, these little white flowers, these are fairy lanterns. So what we saw was just a plethora of fairy lanterns along the Kanaka Valley Trail. And just really a pleasure. One of the rare plants that we have in the Pine Hill Preserve is the Stubbon's Morning Glory. And we are going to be traveling up a hill in our little presentation here called Morning Glory Hill, which is named for this beautiful morning glory, which attracts a number of different critters. So they attract pollinators, and if there's pollinators there, then a little crab spider goes, yay. Hey, this is grocery store, this is great. You'll notice that the leaves of the Stubbon's Morning Glory are really different than your typical morning glory leaf. It's highly divided, and each of the little divisions is very narrow. And so even when, this is pretty unique, so even when there aren't any flowers, this plant is pretty recognizable. So we're gonna walk up Morning Glory Hill. So guess what you're seeing? You're looking west. Here's this lovely gabbro rock, and you see this dark material. Okay, there's a lot of dark mineral that is heavy in iron. And when that iron oxidizes, then you see the red color because you get rust. But here is that lovely gabbro rock. And what we're looking at here is the eastern little end of Folsom Lake. So right over this edge of this hill here, at the bottom of that hill is Salmon Falls Road. So that's where we are. If we just turn our heads to the right a little bit, you will see another 2021 burn that happened within the Folsom Lake Recreation Area. So this burn also sports some of the same kind of plants that came up in the Kanaka Valley burn that you can see. One of the ones that is really fun to see is a plant that is rare, but we're still learning more about it. And that is the brewer's red maids. You're probably familiar with the common red maids, Calendrinia. This is brewer's red maids, and it only comes up the year after a fire. So it is definitely a fire follower. And the next year after the fire, it's done, it's gone. So it's a really interesting plant to see. So here's some good favorite hikers, Lester and Alice, and they are admiring the view from the top of Morning Glory Hill. And up there in amongst those gabbro rocks at the top, there is the narrow-leaved lotus. And it has, of course, beautiful yellow flowers or a little bit orangish, but these red fruits are just delightful. I think I like the fruits of this plant just as much as I like the flowers. So another unit of the Pine Hill Preserve is the Cameron Park unit. So this is down in the southern part of the preserve and closer to Highway 50. So here's Deb Ayers, and she is leading a hike here in the Cameron Park unit. We're taking a look at the creeping sage or Sonoma sage here on the ground, Salvia sonamensis, lovely sage that is very common. By the way, this is a very common sage. But there at the Cameron Park unit of the preserve, we have wonderful displays and populations of the Pine Hill ceanothus, which is definitely rare. It's different from other ceanothus in that it is low to the ground. It's really pretty prostrate. And it has white, sometimes a little bit turned blue flowers, and it blooms early. So it blooms maybe as early as February and into early March. So by the time April runs around, you may have just fruits on this plant. That is a lovely ceanothus and actually makes a ground cover in a lot of the places of the Cameron Park unit. And we have found, Deb and I, that certainly the Pine Hill ceanothus responds to fire. And I'll talk about that in just a bit. So the Cameron Park unit, if you walk to the top of the hill in the Cameron Park unit trail, you'll have another great view to the west. It's really lovely up there. And along the way, you'll have displays of the Red Hill soaproot, Thereabouts grandiflorum, which is a relative, of course, of the common soaproot, which is Chlorogalum pomeridianum. But here's the thing. It's called grandiflorum, which means big flower. It has slightly bigger flowers than the common soaproot, but its flowering stem is actually shorter. You probably know that the common soaproot can have a flowering stem that maybe even goes up to 8 feet. I mean, those things can really be tall. But this guy, this Red Hill soaproot, has a much shorter flowering stem, maybe only one, maybe a little bit more than 1 foot. So it's really pretty short. Of course, the absolute icon of Pine Hill is Pine Hill itself. The Pine Hill Ecological Reserve is on Pine Hill itself. But the icon of this habitat is the Pine Hill flannel bush, a rare and endangered plant, probably the most rare and endangered that we have there. Pine Hill flannel bush is only found on Pine Hill itself and on adjacent hills that are very close by. So very limited distribution and not a terrible, so the number of individuals just in the hundreds in terms of individuals. So one thing about Pine Hill itself, of course, is that at the base of the hill and surrounding the hill, there are a number of residences. And so the California Fish and Wildlife determined that it was a fuel break around the base of the perimeter of Pine Hill would be a good idea. And so the California Native Plant Society here in El Dorado County got enlisted to help to mark where our rare plants were occurring within that designated perimeter before the area was cleared. So that I did not participate in that, but Deb Ayers has told me that that was quite an effort. As you can imagine, you are trying to slog your way through some pretty hard chaparral. So that was not easy. But what the Fish and Wildlife then accomplished was to clear the brush. And they cleared the brush, and then they piled the cuttings into separate piles, and burned them in separate piles. And that gave us an opportunity to do some interesting research. So Deborah and I have started to conduct some research here where we're actually comparing the response of the rare plants and other native plants to fire and to just clearing without fire, and also taking a look at non-native plants as they establish within the cleared areas, and also whether or not and how much they will establish in the cleared and burned parts of the perimeter. And so I was talking to you about Ceanothus rodericii, Pine Hill ceanothus. That has been one of the targets of our studies there. And what we have found is that those seeds just really respond to the fire. So in the several years since the fires have occurred, we have found anywhere from, just a few of the seedlings in one of the burned areas all the way up. I think we counted 81 in one of our plots, and that plot had a 2-meter diameter. So they're really responding, and those seedlings are doing really quite well. Some of them are not only flowering, but setting fruit and also rooting, because the stems of the Ceanothus rodericii can also establish, they can also plant themselves and establish new roots and new plants and clones. So that was pretty interesting to find out. So here's our Pine Hill flannel bush. This is the quintessential one. This is on Pine Hill itself. And you can see that they're very low growing, hence the name decumbens. And we think that this plant actually right here, if you to the left of these folks that are on the left of your screen there is a driveway. And then to the left of the driveway, there's more Pine Hill flannel bush. And we suspect that the driveway actually bisected actually one individual that had spread out, so it clones itself too. We think we may have one genetic individual there that originally was just incredibly huge, because this one itself is really pretty large, as is the one on the other side of the driveway. So we're going to march all the way to the top of the hill here, and we see the old fire lookout, and we also see what we call Gabbroic chaparral. There's typical Sierra foothill chaparral here with our white leaf manzanita and our toyon and our coffeeberry, our hoary leaf coffeeberry. Right back here next to this lovely pole here, you'll see this plant that has some orange stuff on it, and you're thinking, is that thing dying? No, those are the orange flowers of the Pine Hill flannel bush at full bloom. So it's really a gorgeous, gorgeous plant. So we're also helping with a study of flannel bushes, Deborah Ayers and I. So here's Deborah with one of our study subjects. And we are working with Dan Potter, who is Dr. Dan Potter, who is a UC professor down in Davis. And he is conducting the genetic studies of our Pine Hill flannel bush and also of California flannel bush, in addition to some flannel bushes that grow up in Nevada and Yuba counties. And so we're taking a look at those because those look kind of different. And so we're really not sure what those different looking flannel bushes represent. So one thought or one idea is that they might be hybrids between the Pine Hill flannel bush and the California flannel bush. So that's one thing that we're hoping that our genetic studies will be able to answer. But in conjunction with those genetic studies, so actually looking at the DNA of the flannel bushes, we're also looking at some of the physical features of the plants to see if those can help us to distinguish what these different looking flannel bushes actually are. And so we're looking at leaf characteristics, and we're looking at flower characteristics and other characteristics to help us with that study. And we're really excited that for this study to get done, because it'll be really interesting to see. It'll tell us a little bit more about flannel bushes in general. Okay, so onward on our trek, this is of course partially in El Dorado County, but partially in Placer County. The Auburn State Recreation Area is a huge area with a plethora of trails that are all just fantastic. But I think this is my favorite, the Quarry Trail, because it is very accessible. It's right off of Highway 49, near the confluence of the Middle Fork and the North Fork of the American. So you're in between Cool and Auburn on Highway 49. And actually this trail is part of the Western States Trail, the Western States Race Trail. But it was a road, but before it was a road, it was a railroad bed. And that railroad was for the transportation of limestone from the limestone quarry that was along here, and to transport that limestone down canyon. And so it makes a wonderful trail. I love it. And oh, this is one of my favorite hikers. This is my husband. This is my husband, Robert, and his friend, Rob. So Robert and Rob, and really enjoying this lovely trail. Here's Gail again. Gail always seems to be around when I am looking at wonderful rock walls. So we were enjoying all the beautiful plant life on one of the rock walls, of which there are many along the Quarry Trail. May is a great time to go, late April. And there are some rock walls that are actually a little bit higher in elevation, just right off the Quarry Trail. If you hike up one of those offshoot trails, then you can come to some seepy rock walls. And those seepy rock walls support the growth of some lovely plants that just really love to have that water and the rock, like waterfall buttercup. That is really a fun one. So lots of diversity on those rock walls. And one of the bushes that you'll see along the Quarry Trail, and this is actually along the main part of the trail, which is our large flowered bush monkey flower. And so this is called Diplacus grandiflorus now. It used to be considered actually part of the Diplacus aurantiacus, the sticky bush monkey flower, but it has now been given its own species status. It does have a really lovely large flower that does tend to be paler, so more pale orange instead of that bright golden orange sticky monkey flower. We have more pipevine, California pipevine along the Quarry Trail, and so therefore we have pipevine swallowtail caterpillars, and we also have, of course, the butterflies too. I think my favorite trunk along the Quarry Trail is Snowdrop Bush, Styrex redivivus, and this is actually part of this Storax family, of which we just have very few representatives of in California, but they just have the most beautiful flowers, the Snowdrop Bush. It's fragrant, it's white. The flowers do dangle like this, and it's just absolutely gorgeous and attracts lots of really wonderful pollinators as well. I don't think I've seen any other place that has the wonderful displays of Snowdrop Bush that Quarry Trail does. It has a lot of them. I don't know, I haven't ever counted them, but I'm thinking, oh, probably, you know, in the hundreds. Yeah, it's just really incredible there if you're there at the right time. So one thing I will say about Quarry Trail, though, I gotta mention this, is that at the confluence of the Middle Fork and the North Fork of the American River, right there, that is a really popular part of the Auburn State Recreation Area. On the weekend, you will have a very difficult time finding a place to park. And so you either have to get there really early, like 7 in the morning on the weekend, or go during the week. During the week, it's usually not a problem. So here's the map of the Auburn State Recreation Area and the webpage. Oh, by the way, this is being recorded, and we will post my presentation with the slides, so you can get all of these websites and all of the references and resources that I'll mention later will be available to you, so you don't have to feel like you have to very quickly write things down. You'll be able to get that later. But look at this, you know, it's just incredible the amount of land that the state recreation area encompasses, and there are many, many, many trails that are just delightful. We're going to head north now and out of El Dorado County. I'm sorry, I'm going out of El Dorado County, but I have to mention this wonderful trail. It's called the Independence Trail, and it's actually a part of the South Yuba River State Park. So the South Yuba River State Park, the Independence Trail, what that actually represents is a diversion canal that has been converted to a trail. And so the cool thing about this trail, this is the best part, and by the way, the best thing about it is that the plants are on the sides of the trail like this, including the flowers. And so to look at the plants closely and to take photographs of the plants closely, you do not have to bend over. Isn't that cool? Yeah, it's just wonderful. There are 2 sections. One of the sections goes to the west of the parking area, and the other goes to the east and toward the river itself. The western part of it was actually part of a fire that happened last year. I don't know how much of the flume that we're seeing here burned, but the west part of the trail is closed, but the east part is still open. And the east part is really gorgeous, and I encourage you to visit there. So we did this with our chapter a few years ago, and some of my favorite hikers went along. And so we have Chris and Lisa, and here's Tal, and here's Bill and Bonnie, and we had a wonderful time. We had to take a picture on the flume. I'm hoping that the state park, South Yuba State Park, and also it has a nonprofit supporting organization that helped to originally get this to get that trail going. I'm hoping they're going to be able to repair the trail and on the west part and get it open again. So a lot of what you're seeing is on the north facing slope. And so then you see wonderful plants that like the cool, a little bit wetter north facing slopes, things like the wonderful Pacific starflower, which is now in the genus Lysimachia. Sorry about that. There we go. But what are you going to do? You got to accept it. And then big leaf maple is in abundance along this trail, as are other wonderful wildflowers. We have Hartwig's ginger is there, and Calicortus monophilus yellow star tulip. Here it is in its typical form. And some of you are going to say, what are these things over here to the left of that wonderful yellow star tulip. They don't look quite right. As a matter of fact, one is dangling, and this one up here looks kind of small and a little pale. What that is actually represents is a hybrid between fairy lanterns, Calochortus albus, and Calochortus monophilus, yellow star tulip. They do hybridize where they co-occur. So it's really pretty interesting to see. Of course, there are animals along the trail, like alligator lizards crawling up the side of the slope of the canal. And also, I was able to capture a picture of this tiger moth laying those pearly eggs on deer brush. So on a deer bush leaf. So that was really pretty neat. Lots of critters. Oh, but I will say that it's a good idea to bring in, I think actually not good idea. I think it's absolutely necessary to bring insect repellent because there are lots of mosquitoes and there are there are also lots of ticks. I have come home with ticks several times from this trail. So be forewarned that insect repellent is a necessity here. I think I have mentioned to some of you that this lovely twining Brodea, which is of course in the Brodea family, but it is actually in the genus Diclostoma or Diclostema, however you want to pronounce it, also called snake lily, that it can actually tie itself at knots. If you didn't believe me, here is the evidence. It really does tie itself in knots. Isn't that cool? I love this plant. That's one of my very favorite members of the Brodea family. There's also on the west part of the trail, there is a waterfall on Rush Creek that does flow into the Yuba, into the South Yuba. And here is one of the maps. There actually are two maps in the brochure for the South Yuba River State Park. There are a number of different units. Where we were talking about is Independence Trail along Highway 49 here in the middle of the map. But there are a number of other units, and a lot of them have just terrific trails with wonderful wild flowers, like this Point Defiance Loop Trail, which is to the left here, so to the west of Independence Trail. And that is, it does require a little huffing and puffing. There's some climbing to do and some rock scrabbling to do, but it's a beautiful trail with lots of wonderful plants to see. Back in El Dorado County in the Georgetown district of the El Dorado National Forest is Traverse Creek Botanical Special Interest Area. What is here is another very specialized rock, and that is serpentine. We've got serpentine, which actually is metamorphic. Okay, so it has some similarities to gabbro rock, but it has minerals in it that include some heavy metals. And those heavy metals can be very difficult for, I would say, most plants to grow in. And so we have specialized plants that are serpentine endemics. And one place to see these is at Traverse Creek. Where Traverse Creek is south of Georgetown. It's south of Georgetown. You can take either Meadowbrook Road or you can take Bear Creek Road. And where Bear Creek and Meadowbrook Road where they intersect is where the parking area is for that special botanical interest area. And there are trails for you to explore. So one thing that you can see here is that, serpentine really does a number. So this is where the rock is exposed. There's very, very little in terms of deep soil. And so specialized plants or plants that can tolerate these kinds of conditions grow here. At the edge, you can see we've got some chaparral types of shrubs, some manzanita and whatnot. And then behind them, you can see forest. Now, this forest of our typical lower elevation or mid-elevation forest is growing on deeper soils. So the serpentine, there's no serpentine soil over here, there's serpentine soil here. This is my, sorry about that. This is my good friend and colleague, Lisa Serafini, who teaches field botany at Sacramento City College, which I also taught until I retired a few years ago. And I will mention that she teaches field botany, advanced field botany at Sacramento City College. And she also teaches a Sierra Nevada plants class, which is a week-long, actually 8-day-long field class that she teaches out of the Eastern Sierra. And every day you go on a field trip to a different place along the Eastern Sierra. And it is an absolutely fantastic. There is no prerequisites, but you do join by applying, because she can only accept up to maybe 16 people at a time. So that's definitely something worth checking into. It's really, really fun. So I did want to mention that on your way up to Traverse Creek, one way to go is by way of 193. So you head up Highway 49 out of Placerville, make a right turn onto 193, and head up 193 up to Meadowbrook Road is the best way to go from the south end. And along the slopes there of 193, here's the highway here, and this is we're in a little pullout here, a little pullout. So you have to know where you're going and be careful. But you can see Dendromica rigida, the bush poppy there, which is just incredibly beautiful. And you can also see our woolly paintbrush, which is Cattleya foliolosa, which we can also see at Pine Hill too. That's a good place to see the woolly paintbrush. On just growing right out of the serpentine rock, you can see Gesophus buchella, the blue cup. Oh my gosh, isn't that amazing? It just grows right out of the rock. And then on the serpentine, where there's some thin soils, in the springtime, you can see whole displays of gold fields. Notice that I did not put down the species. I did not commit to a species here. And that's because there are two possible species that this could be. It could be Lasthenia californica, California goldfields, or it could be Lasthenia gracilis, which is common goldfields. How do you tell the difference? Good luck. So this is the key from Jepson. This is the only part where I'm going to put anything about the Jepson manual in here, I promise. But this is the key to determine the difference between California goldfields and common goldfields. It depends on the modified sepals, which is called pappus, of the flowers. So here's the pappus. And if they're there, you can probably tell the difference, and you have a hand lens or a dissecting scope with you. You can determine whether you have California or common goldfields. But notice that both of them may not have a pappus, in which case you cannot tell them apart. There it is. And nobody's carrying around a DNA sequencer with them yet. So just be happy with goldfields. Also at Traverse Creek, you have bitterroot, the Wisteria rediviva, with its wonderful succulent leaves and gorgeous large flowers. And it grows on the serpentine rock. The narrow-petaled trillium actually grows on the forest soil, so underneath the forest trees, underneath the conifers. So it doesn't grow directly on the serpentine, but it's just one of my favorite trilliums. It's really so pretty. Another plant that grows on both gabbro and also grows on serpentine soils is an oak called leather oak. So leather oak is a shrub, and it's endemic to the gabbro soils and to serpentine soils. It does not grow on other soils. And we think probably because it just doesn't compete very well with faster growing and plants on deeper soils. So you can see that it has a tiny little acorn, and it has tiny little, very tough leaves, and hence the name leather oak. But I felt really lucky to get this photo of this vireo in its nest and amongst the leather oak branches. Onward, we're going to head south now. We're going to go out of El Dorado County again. Sorry, I have to because I love Calaveras Big Tree State Park. This is the Discovery Stump that is along the Northgo Trail of Calaveras Big Tree State Park. Calaveras Big Tree State Park is just off of Highway 4 east of Arnold in Calaveras County, obviously. And this stump is called the Discovery Stump because it is the stump of the first big tree that was discovered by a white person, okay, Augustus Dowd. And it was subsequently taken down, of course, naturally. And at one time it was a dance floor. Yeah. At any rate, along that Northgo Trail, you can see a number of the wonderful giant sequoias, Sequoia dendron giganteum, just incredibly gorgeous trees. And of course, on the understory, you can see a number of different forest plants that are very interesting, like snow plant, Sarcodes sanguinea. It's actually a member of the heath family, the heather family. So the heath family, which includes things like manzanita and madrone, as well as blueberries and huckleberries and all those good things, and lots of others. And this trail is gorgeous because in the fall time, the mountain dogwoods turn their color, and it's just super, super beautiful in the fall. Contrasting with the brown, reddish brown bark of the trees, just really gorgeous. And along the trail, you will see this down tree that the trail was cut through. And that way you can take a look at the rings here and appreciate how old these trees really are. They're just incredibly gorgeous. And this gives you a sense of scale of how large these trees are. I love this trail, this Northgo Trail, because as soon as I start walking there, I have a sense of tranquility. I feel at peace with these trees and with the other plants. And it gives you a sense of the time scales because these things can be more than 2,000 years old. There's another hike to do along at Calaveras Big Tree. So further down the road is a Lava Bluffs trail where you can see some wonderful plants that like to grow on volcanic material, thin soils. And you can see that, of course, also in the El Dorado forest, which we did just last Friday at a lava cap within the forest. And this here, you can see some similar situations and similar plants. One thing I really love are these seepy rock walls. And the Dudleya cymosa growing along the rock walls are just incredibly gorgeous. Here's a map of the park. So the visitor center is right near Highway 4, but there's a road that takes you down to the Lava Bluffs Trail about midway down. And there's another trail called the South Grove Trail down at the southern end of the park, which is lovely. I like it because it is much less developed than the Northgo Trail and much less crowded. But there are a whole bunch of big trees along that trail as well. So it is well worth your time going all the way down to the south. And by the way, this road is paved, so there's no problems at all. Another place that is just wonderful to visit in El Dorado National Forest, and actually borders the Toyabe as well. And this is Lake Winnemucca, and there's a number of ways to get there. So the cool things about those trails, both trails, is you can see white bark pine. Pine is albicol on on your way to the lake. And so you can see what happens when a tree is exposed to wind, and the ravages of wind and ice can actually cause branches on one side of the tree to be completely destroyed. So you end up with flagging, as it's called. And you also see twistiness or crumholzing in the white bark pine because of the same conditions. It's just a lovely pine. It is a 5-needle pine. 5-needle pines are also sometimes called white pines, and it includes sugar pine, also western white pine, limber pine, foxtail pine, and all of these can be susceptible to the white pine blister rust. So we're having issues with our lovely white pines. This is a trail that comes from Carson Pass itself. You can head to Frog Lake and then to Lake Winnemucca along that trail. There's a couple of my favorite hikers. And along that trail, there are so many wildflowers if you go at the right time of year. So usually late July, and maybe even into August, depending on the year. So you might see our lovely alpine gentian, and you might see Shasta knotweed, a native knotweed that has gorgeous little flowers. It's really a cute little guy. But you might also be treated to the site of the Clark's nutcracker on the white bark pine. So what Clark's nutcrackers do, they actually feed on the seeds of the pine, but what they do is gather them. They gather those seeds and they cache them in the ground. They come back to eat them, but they don't eat all of them. And in the right conditions, those buried planted seeds will then grow into new white bark pine. So they have a lovely symbiotic relationship. From Woods Lake, which is off of Highway 88, you can also take a different trail up to Lake Winnemucca and see some different plants like the grand juniper, which is really gorgeous. And here's western white pine right here. But I wanted to show you this photo. This was taken last August 6th of last year. And unfortunately, what we saw were white pines that were dying, and perhaps from that white pine blister rust. So this is definitely a concern for our white bark pines. Along the trail, though, we saw some dog vomit slime mold. That's cool. So slime molds are actually called slime molds, but they're not truly molds. True molds are fungi. A slime mold is not a fungus. It's actually, its basic life form is a protist. It's more like an amoeba than it is like a true mold. What they do have in common, though, is that when this plasmodial stage ends and it's ready to reproduce, what it does is produce a stalk that resembles the sporangium of a true mold and produces little bits that act like spores to reproduce. So it's a very interesting life form, these plasmodial slime molds. And then, of course, there's lovely wildflowers along that trail from Woods Lake, like the grass of Parnassus, which you don't get to see every day. So it's really fun to see things that are less common. But I don't know if you remember last August. Of course you remember last August and what it was like. And so this is the site we saw when we got to up to Lake Winnemucca. This is all smoke. This is all smoke. Yeah, so yeah, it was, we probably shouldn't have been there. The AQI was way high. So we probably shouldn't have been there. But at Lake Winnemucca, you can also see another of our upper montane type of forest trees, and this is the mountain hemlock. So Tsuga mertensiana. And excuse me about that. The tips of hemlocks have this tendency to droop, making them look sort of like a Dr. Seuss tree. So you can actually identify them from a distance. Okay, Deborah insisted that I include this lovely spot. So this is the last spot that we'll give any amount of time to here. And where this is, it's along Camp Creek. So to get there, you take Mormon Immigrant Trail up into the El Dorado National Forest, where you will see the effects of the Caldor fire, until you get to North-South Road. You make a right turn on North-South Road and head south just a few miles until you come to the first bridge, which is the bridge over Camp Creek. And to your right, you will see this. This is not a lava cap. This is granite. You'll see this lovely granite rocky slope that has lots of water this year. It has seeps running on it. And of course, that water just drains down into Camp Creek. But this is an old road that has become a trail, which you can walk beyond the rock face here. And you can park on the east side of the road. There's plenty of parking on the east side of the road on both sides of the bridge. You can park there. But this is just so gorgeous. Full of Douglas's meadow foam, this really gorgeous meadow foam, which of course, as you know, likes a little bit of water. And also seep spring or common monkey flower is just abundant there. And there's a number of monkey flowers we saw besides the erythranthes table. We also saw Diplacus Torrei's monkey flower growing in amongst the rocks, and Quick's Phacelia. It's a fun little Phacelia with tiny little blue-purple flowers that we see amongst the rocks. It's just really gorgeous, made a lovely display. And you can also see Indian manzanita or Arctosophilus Miwaka. This manzanita appears similar to our whiteleaf manzanita that we have down here in the foothills, but its leaves are quite a bit larger and longer and more tapered at the tip. Another difference is that the Miwok manzanita has pearl, whereas whiteleaf manzanita does not. So somebody needs to mute themselves. I'm getting crackling noises. It has the ability to sprout, whereas our whiteleaf manzanita does not, because it does not have a burl. So even though it got burned in the Caldor fire, this Miwok manzanita is resprouting and it will regrow into a shrub. It'll take some years, but it'll get there. So this is what this same wet granite face looked like back in 2020. And you can see the Indian manzanita growing at the top here. And the forest was nice and green. So it's a little different now. It's a little different. We also saw though animals, and one of the animals that we saw back in 2020 were these pale swallowtails that were attracted to the moist soils of the trail, and so they were congregating there. It is really quite lovely to see. Well, that ends where the spots that I was going to talk at any length about, but I needed to tell you about Deer Creek Hills, which is part of the Sacramento Valley Conservancy preserved lands is Deer Creek Hills. And our Lisa Cooper, we need to share with the Sacramento Valley Conservancy. She's on their board and she is also a docent and leads hikes at Deer Creek Hills. And so she arranged for us to do a hike there this year in late March. And there's lots of wonderful habitats there. There's riparian habitat, there are oak woodlands, There are grasslands, there are some vernal pools actually, and the dredger tailings have actually acted as a very interesting habitat. You can see the tufted poppy just growing in profusion on the dredger tailings. And along kind of at the base of the dredger tailings, we also see the glassy onion, which is a lovely native onion. So I will tell you that there are dates that you can visit Deer Creek Hills on your own. And those are posted on the calendar for the Sacramento Valley Conservancy. And they also do docent-led tours as well. So docent-led hikes. And so they're well worth going to. So make sure that you get to the Sacramento Valley Conservancy and Deer Creek Hills websites. These are wonderful, wonderful places to visit. So here we are actually at the edge of a vernal pool. It's really fun to see, along with some of my favorite hikers. And here's Lisa leading our hike there at Dill Creek Hills in amongst the lovely oaks. To the right of the crowd there, the creek was there. And then there was another slope full of lupins and poppies and all kinds of other wonderful plants. So wonderful, great place to go. So please go there. I have to mention Bridal Veil Falls and picnic area in the El Dorado National Forest. There's the falls, but I don't know if you've ever stopped there. It's worth a stop right off Highway 50, east of Pollock Pines. Make a stop, especially like in May. May is a good time, or late April. And on one of the rocks, I have seen the Sedum spathulifolium, and it is a host plant for the naked broom rape, which is really pretty. And others. There's lots of other wildflowers that grow on this lovely rock wall. Down along the road, down to the parking area of the picnic area, and down along a trail along the South Fork of the American River. At the picnic area, you can see Bride's Bonnet, which is a lovely lily. And again, the Trillium angustipetalum. Lovely place to visit. Caples Creek, this is where we're going to go probably in late June. Look for a posted date on our website soon, so that we can see the effects of the prescribed burn and how that prescribed burn helped to prevent the worst from happening around Caples Creek and the forest there. There is a lovely meadow, a lovely mountain meadow. So I've got to mention mountain meadows. There are wonderful places to visit. Another place to visit Mountain Meadow is Pie Pie Campground, which has an accessible trail, including a boardwalk, and another lovely wetland. So a lovely mountain meadow full of the Lupinus polyphyllus, and also, and also a boardwalk that you can see the middle fork of the Casumnes River from. So just a wonderful place. And lots of different wildflowers, including our bleeding heart. Here's a big crew of my favorite hikers that we did this trail back in 2019. It is a very easy trail. It's so easy. So if you have someone who has limited mobility, this is accessible, and it is just a wonderful spot. Other mountain meadows, Camus Metal. This is not too far from Wrights Lake. We call it Camus Meadow because it sports blue camas earlier than this video, or this photo was taken. We do have a YouTube video you can get a link to see a video about Camus Meadow that we put together a couple of years ago, and that's available. There's a link on our website. Leak Springs, this is along Highway 88, just before you meet up with, start over again. This is along Mormon Immigrant Trail, just before you meet up with Highway 88. That's what I should have said. This is the Leak Springs Meadow. The Leak Springs is the headwaters of the Cosumnes River itself. Gotta visit, beautiful place. Something really close by is a Bureau of Land Management land on Magnolia Ranch. It used to be, so this is a wonderful place to visit. Wonderful in April because it is Nemophila heaven. Nemophila heterophila, white Nemophilas, and baby blue eyes, and 5-spot. You can see all of them there, and in profusion. Really wonderful spot. Gotta go. So I did also want to mention some resources that are available to you through a number of different organizations. So we do have on our website, our chapter website, a page called Plant Walks with a map showing a number of the places that I actually have already talked about today. There are descriptions, and for a number of these, we have plant lists. We have posted plant lists that you can download and use. I love National Forest websites because you can go to their recreation, and then you can go to under recreation to hikes, and under hikes you can choose hikes, and there will be a list of trails for you to take hikes on. And if you click on the names of the trails, it'll tell you where it is, whether or not it's open at the time, and some of the description of it. So these are some of our more local national forests, but of course, there are many more national forests. Also, our land trusts are wonderful. A lot of land trusts have lands that you can visit. The American River Conservancy has a number of properties where they lead hikes. Docent Led Hikes, our own Annie Walker is one of the volunteers. She volunteers with our chapter of El Dorado CNPS, but she also volunteers with the American River Conservancy and leads hikes. So this is their upcoming events, the hiking and walking page, so visit that. The Placer Land Trust also has properties that has public access. And so this is also a great resource for nearby places to hike and see wonderful plants and wonderful animals and habitats. My husband and I visited one that's just so easy to get to. It's right off of Highway 80. You take the Bowman exit north of Auburn. It's called the Canyon View Trail. It's only a mile and a half long, but it is really gorgeous. There's a little 50-acre preserve full of habitat and plants and animals that are just really wonderful. I think my husband and I went there just a few weeks ago, and I don't think I have ever seen more pretty faces in all my life. So Trittle ixioides, just all over the place. But there's so many other resources to find places to hike and find wonderful things to see. Other chapters like the Redbud chapter of CNPS, state parks. So not only the South Yuba State Park, but so many of our state parks have wonderful trails to hike. Our national parks, our national forests, Bureau of Land Management lands, additional land trusts and other nonprofits, and books like this one. So Wildfire Walks and Roads of the Sierra. This is wonderful. She has plant lists in there. And Tahoe's Spectacular Wildflower Trails by Julie Carville has great suggestions for hiking up in the Tahoe area. And then Laird Blackwell has this great book, month by month guide. So he says, okay, in February, this is the good place to go. And then in March, this is a good place to go. And then in April, this is a good place to go. And this is what you might see there. So this is really, I love this book. Beautiful illustrations and so many ideas of where to go and see the different types of wildflowers. And this one, the Redbud chapter did, the wildflowers of Nevada and Placer County. They also have a Shrubs and Trees book of the trees and shrubs of Placer and Nevada County. And these give you ideas of places to go to see those wonderful things. And there's a lot of other books too out there. And as I said, probably one of your best resources for finding wonderful places to go are your hiking buddies. And I'm open to ideas because, you know, I always like to have a new place to go. So with that, I'll open it up to questions or comments or ideas. I'll stop sharing.
You can unmute now and ask a question directly.
Yeah, go ahead and do that.
Do you expect a much smaller crop of wildflowers this year, or do you think our late rains are still going to kick in?
Oh, I have been pleasantly surprised. I have been pleasantly surprised. I thought it was going to be, you know, long about, you know, early April, I was going, you know, I thought the vernal pools aren't even going to make any flowers, because I was driving down there and like in March and it was like dry and it looked like it was crispy critters. And I was like, oh no. But then after our rains that we had in April and then in early May, the vernal pools were great. Some of the pictures that I showed you, I took this year. And then we found that also to be the case in areas that are further up the hill, like at Pine Hill. We've seen some lovely wildflowers. And then on Friday is when we did our lava caps hike, and we saw quite a number of beautiful blooming wildflowers. So I don't think it's going to be bad. And there's, you know, there's still snow up there in the high country. And so I'm thinking that the high country is going to be good too. So I've been pleasantly surprised.
Yeah, we do.
I just wanted to thank you so much for that that marvelous talk. I happen to be traveling up to Tahoe this weekend, and I really want to see Dicentra uniflora, I think, the steer's head.
Steer's head, yeah.
As well as the snow plant. So I think I sussed out Burton Creek Preserve and Washoe Meadows, the north side and the south side, lower elevation. Does anybody have any information on that? Do you have any information on that?
Well, I expect Washoe Meadows to be a little better than it was last year. We actually went up there last year, and we did find some flowering plants. It was kind of on the dry side. But this year I expect it to be better. I don't remember seeing steer's head. Has anybody seen steer's head at Washoe?
I didn't see any on Calflora, but I think we might travel from the north side down. So
That's a good idea.
Yeah, just to kind of look at some of the spots where they've been spotted before around this time of year.
Well, that, you know, I think that you might see them. If they've been spotted there before, you might see them this year. I will tell you, there's orchids there.
And which location?
Oh,
This time of year?
There's some along the trail. Yeah, in the wetter spots. Yeah, in the little wetter spots. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. So does anybody have a favorite hike or favorite trail that I did not mention that they'd like to share with others?
Sure, I have one. This is Alice. The Bucks Bar Trail. I don't think you mentioned that one, right?
No, I didn't.
It was really, really covered with flowers about 2 weeks ago, pretty much from top to bottom. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, Sweetwater Trail also was really nice this year. I think that late April.
Sweetwater. Okay.
The late April rain that we got just really brought the flowers out. There was such a variety.
Wonderful. Sweetwater, okay, great. And Buck's Bar. Cool.
It was so great, Jenna. It's so inspiring. Makes us all want to get out there and hike tomorrow, I'm sure. It's really good.
I
Does
just
anybody-
want to comment, you should all check out the chapter YouTube site. Jenna's talk will be posted there in a couple weeks. And there are also recordings of several of her favorite hikes, including the Pie Pie Campground one.
Right, and those are really nice little YouTubes.
Yeah, they're fun. They were fun to put together.
And I'm encouraging Jenna to do more of that.
Well, thank you.
Well, it's different. If somebody wants to film, if would like to volunteer and come along to film during the hike, that would be great. It's just kind of hard to lead the hike and film it at the same time. So that would be wonderful to have a volunteer to come along and do that.
Okay, so I want to thank Ginna very much for sharing her favorite hikes. And I would encourage you to check our webpage where future hikes will be posted. One of the advantages of being in El Dorado County is that we start low at the Vernal Pools when it's a lovely spring weather. And as it gets hotter and hotter, we move up the hills until we're at 7,000 feet where it's lovely and cool. So I would encourage you, if you are down in the valley and wondering where you want to hike to escape the heat, that you keep checking our chapter webpage because Ginna will be posting upper elevation hikes in the cooler elevations. Thank you so much, Ginna.
Oh, well, thank you. It was really fun. Thanks for everybody for coming. It was very fun.
We love
Thank
it.
you,
Um,
Jenna.
Thank you.
Any questions you can post to Ginna or our webpage.
And
yeah.
meanwhile, we